When she got back to the cottage, Granny Weatherwax was standing in the middle of the kitchen floor with a face like an unmade bed and her arms folded. One foot tapped on the floor. "She married a wizard," said Granny as soon as her friend had entered. "You can't tell me that's right." "Well, wizards can marry, you know. They just have to hand in the staff and pointy hat. There's no actual law that says they can't, so long as they gives up wizarding. Ooh, they supposed to be married to the job." "I reckon it's a job being married to her," said Granny, her face screwed up in a sour smile. Been pickling much this year?" said Nanny, employing a fresh association of ideas around the word vinegar, which had just popped into her head. "My onions all got the screw fly." "Oh, what a pity. You like onions." "Even screw flies gotta eat," said Granny. She glared at the door. "Nice," she said. "She's got a knitted cover on the lid of her privy," said Nanny. "Pink?" "Yeah." "Nice." "She's not bad," said Nanny. "She does good work over in Fiddler's Elbow. People speak highly of her." Granny sniffed. "They speak highly of me?" she said. "Oh, no. They speak quietly about you, Esme." "Good. You see her hat pins?" "Oh, I thought they were rather nice, Esme." That's witchcraft today. All jewelry, no drawers." Nanny, who considered both to be optional, tried to build an embankment against the rising tide of ire. "You could think of it as an honor, really, them not wanting you to take part." "That's nice," Nanny sighed. "Sometimes nice is worth trying, Esme," she said. "I never does anyone a bad turn if I can't do 'em a good one. Gaitha, you know that. I don't have to do no frills or fancy labels." Nanny sighed. Of course, it was true. Granny was an old-fashioned witch. She didn't do good for people. She did right by them. But Nanny knew that people don't always appreciate right. Like old Polet the other day when he fell off his horse, what he wanted was a painkiller. What he needed was the few seconds of agony as Granny popped the joint back into place. The trouble was, people remembered the pain. You got a lot better with people when you remembered to put frills around it, and took an interest and said things like, "How are you?" Esme didn't bother with that kind of stuff because she already knew. Nanny Ogg knew too, but also knew that letting on you knew gave people the serious willies. She put her head on one side, and Granny's foot was still tapping. "Are you planning anything, Esme? I know you. You've got that look." "What look, pray?" "Oh, that look you had when that bandit was found naked up a tree and crying all the time and going on about that horrible thing was after him. Oh, a funny thing, we ain't never found no paw prints. That look? He deserved more for that than what he done." "Well, yeah, you had that look just before old Hoggett was found beaten black and blue in his own pigsty. I wouldn't talk about it." "Oh, you mean old Hoggett the wife-beater? Old Hoggett who won't never lift his hand to a woman no more," said Granny. The thing her lips had pursed into may have been called a smile. "And that's the look you had the time all that snow slid down on old Milson's house just after he called you an interfering old bag," said Nanny. Granny hesitated. Nanny was pretty sure that it had been natural causes, and also knew that Granny knew she suspected this, and that pride was fighting a battle with honesty. "Well, that as may be," said Granny noncommittally. "Like someone who might go along to the trials and, I don't know, do something?" said Nanny. Her friend's glare should have made the air sizzle. "Oh, is that what you think of me? That's what we've come to, have we?" "Lettice thinks we should move with the times." "Well, I moves with the times. We ought to move with the times. No one said we ought to give 'em a push. I expect you'll be wanting to be going now, Gaitha. I want to be alone with my thoughts." Nanny's own thoughts as she scurried home in relief were that Granny Weatherwax was not an advertisement for witchcraft. Oh, she was one of the best at it, no doubt about that. A certain kind, certainly, but a girl starting out in life might well say to herself, "Is this it? You worked hard and denied yourself things, and what you got at the end of it was hard work and self-denial?" Granny wasn't exactly friendless, but what she commanded was mostly respect. People learned to respect storm clouds, too. They refreshed the ground. You needed them, but they weren't nice. Nanny Ogg went to bed in 3 flannelette night-dresses because sharp frosts were already pricking the autumn air. She was also in a troubled frame of mind. Some sort of war had been declared. She knew it. Granny could do some terrible things when roused, and the fact that they'd been done to those who richly deserved them didn't make them any less terrible. She'd be planning something dreadful, Nanny Ogg knew. She herself didn't like winning things. Winning was a habit that was hard to break, and brought you a dangerous status that was hard to defend. You'd walk uneasily through life, always on the lookout for the next girl with a better broomstick and quicker hand on the frog. She turned over under the mountain of Elder Downs. In Granny Weatherwax's world view, there was no room for second place. You won, or you were a loser. There was nothing wrong with being a loser except for the fact, of course, you weren't the winner. Nanny had always pursued the policy of being a good loser. People liked you when you almost won and bought you drinks. She'd only just lost was a much better compliment than she only just won. Runners-up had more fun, she reckoned, but it wasn't a word Granny had much time for. In her own darkened cottage, Granny Weatherwax sat and watched the fire die. It was a gray-walled room, the color that old plaster gets, not so much from dirt as from age. There was not a thing in it that wasn't useful, utilitarian, earned its keep. Every flat surface in Nanny Ogg's cottage had been pressed into service as a holder for ornaments and potted plants. People gave Nanny Ogg things. Cheap fairground tat, Granny always called it, at least in public. What she thought of it in the privacy of her own head, she never said. She rocked gently as the last ember winked out. It's hard to contemplate in the gray hours of the night that probably the only reason people would come to your funeral would be to make sure that you were dead. Next day, Percy Hopcroft opened his back door and looked straight into the blue stare of Granny Weatherwax. "Oh, God," he said under his breath. Granny gave a little awkward cough. "Mr. Hopcroft, I'll come about them apples you named after Mrs. Ogg," she said. Percy's knees began to tremble, and his wig started to slide off the back of his head to the hoped-for security of the floor. "I should like to thank you for doing it because it's made her very happy," Granny went on in a tone of voice which would have struck one who knew her as curiously monotonous. "She has done a lot of fine work, and it's about time she got her little reward. It was a very nice thought, so I've brung you this little token." And Hopcroft jumped backwards as Granny hand dipped swiftly into her apron and produced a small black bottle. "Which is very rare because of the rare herbs in it." "What are rare?" "Extremely rare herbs." Eventually it crept over Hopcroft that he was supposed to take the bottle. He gripped the top of it very carefully, as if it might whistle or develop legs. Thank you very much," he mumbled, and Granny nodded swiftly. "Blessings upon this house," she said, and turned and walked down the path. Hopcroft shut the door carefully and then flung himself against it. "Oh, you start packing now!" he shouted at his wife, who had been watching from the kitchen door. "What? Our whole life's here. We can't just run away from it." "Oh, better to run than hop, woman. What's she want from me? What's she want? She's just never nice." Miss Hopcroft stood firm. She'd just got the cottage looking right, and they bought a new pump. Some things were hard to leave. "Let's just stop and think," she said. "What's in the bottle? What could it be?" Hopcroft held it at arm's length. "You want to find out? Stop shaking, man. She didn't actually threaten you, did she?" said his wife. "Oh, she said, blessings upon this house. That sounds pretty damn threatening to me." "That was Granny Weatherwax, that was." And he put the bottle on the table. They stared at it, standing in the cautious-leaning position of people that were ready to run if anything began to happen. "Says Hair Restorer on the label," says Miss Hopcroft. "Well, I'm not using it. She'll ask us about it later. That's her way. If you think for 1 minute We can try it out on the dog."